So, one of the reasons why I love DMing in whatever sitting or rule set, be it D&D, be it Pathfinder, be it Starfinder, be it just the imagination. DMing, or Game Masters as I used to call it as a teenager, was essentially a way for me to relax and process the colorful world of video games and fantasy. You know, um, it's quite a personal story, but I have a cousin who he broke his back, and he taught me D&D, and our world opened up when we were like 10 years old. We would tell each other stories, man. Really fantasize about these D&D adventures and how we would play a role in those adventures and have like people from school feature and kind of mature through these social simulations that we would put out for each other, not really knowing that we were doing pretty high level storytelling together. And we would do that for 5 to 10 years. Every Christmas, every May break, we would visit each other and go through these things. And then later on, as video games developed, I developed with them. Now, I had a yearning, maybe like you as well, to have more of a game. I wanted to slow it down. I wanted to fester in the idea that some video games gave me. And I'm going to highlight a couple of people that did that for me, which essentially prompted me to make these campaigns, right? So, one thing that I will omit right now because it's such a difficult thing to post on YouTube, but music is huge for me. Like when I got into metal, I got into metal from an early age because my dad gave me a Deep Purple CD once, and from there on, I loved all those, yeah, sort of rock and roll kind of CDs. And then later on, when YouTube came about, there was this animated music video that was all the rage when YouTube just came about, and there was an animated music video of Ninja Scroll the movie, and it had the Cradle of Filth cover song of "Hallowed Be Thy Name" from Iron Maiden, and like in one video, I got completely transformed. Another video that was roaming around the like 18 years ago, you might remember this, was Warhammer 40k art by John Blanche, I think his name is, with "Blow Me Away" from Breaking Benjamin in the background. And all those things, man, they were so formative for me. And like, I think like it was only later when streamers came about that those memories were shared, really. Like a lot of people sync "Blow Me Away" with Halo 2, but some people didn't play Halo 2, right? I was one of those. I grew up with Half Life. I grew up with the PlayStation, and there was a fanboyism back then. You were either that camp or that camp. Just rest assured, I've played all of the Halos with my wife. They're amazing games. Actually, happy that I ignored them when I was younger. Kind of saved them up, you know. Um, but there were a couple of game developers that made me realize that something was going on. I have an old video on my channel. My channel is a mess right now, but I think I'm gonna keep it like that. Let it be a little bit weird and mysterious. But there are a couple of game devs that definitely showed me what game development can be. So one of the first guys that comes to mind is Chris Metzen. He is the heart and soul and the creative director at Blizzard. He made the World of Warcraft story revolve around these characters that he came up with. And what I like about him was that he always had this lower threshold towards really interesting storytelling. Like, he's a very gifted artist, but he always made sure that everyone would understand it. Like, to an orc and a man and a human, like back to back, fighting hordes of enemies. That's his jam, you know. And being awesome and having awesome characters, that was what he strived to do. And especially when he created World of Warcraft with his team, you could see that a lot of there seems to be an interesting dilemma when you play World of Warcraft Classic. On the one hand, what was functional, and on the one hand, what was narrative. And he was very famous for the narrative side, and he really thought about what he wanted players to get through and what stories he wanted to tell. Um, it's no surprise that he got a lot of inspiration from Warhammer 40k. He's a huge Warhammer 40k geek, but he's a geek for all things. He's a geek for movies. He's a geek for video games. He's a geek for Warhammer 40k. He's really into comic heroes. He's all over the place, really. And what I like about him is that he never really stuck to one thing. He just has this giant ambition for all geek culture things. It's no wonder that he got rich. Um, and yeah, he's the guy that sort of saves WoW right now. Now, what I find interesting about him, right, is that he was building a lot of other games that never really saw the light of day. But his artwork shows you the whimsical heavy metal side. Now, when I say whimsical, I need to define that term a little bit. It's not necessarily trying to be funny or Terry Pratchett-esque, but there is a loose and fast um, stream of consciousness going on with the whimsicality of old heavy metal. Like, maybe you remember that movie Heavy Metal from 1981, where a bunch of artists came about and created this work. There was a lot of emphasis on not necessarily style over substance, but definitely having the character in the picture tell the story from itself, and then sort of sinew them all together into something worthwhile. That's sort of what I mean with whimsical. Now, Chris Madsen, in his art style, like, you can see this hyper proportionate American style. But you need to know that when he worked on Warcraft and earlier on, the Warcraft developers were actually waiting for Warhammer to become a video game, and they were ready to make that game, but it didn't really work out. Warhammer, the Games Workshop, had other plans, so Blizzard came about and they made Warcraft. So there has always been a strange marriage between the two. Now, where does Warcraft come from? Oh, excuse me, where does Warhammer come from? Warhammer Fantasy came from a lot of war games trying to create a TTRPG a little bit like Dungeons and Dragons. And what's interesting there is that it's very difficult because you can't really call it competition. Um, there was definitely a sense of competition, but there was also a sense of being at the time and working with the sign of the times. Remember that all of this was done in the 1980s, 70s, 80s. So a lot of people and a lot of subcultures had lost the stability of the church and the Reformation throughout the world after the Second World War. So a lot of religions and a lot of urges for religion got taken over by really different beliefs. For example, Scientology, I believe, came from this. It was an urge for the spiritual explanation to the world of the atomic bomb. And so with Dungeons and Dragons, what you have there is a pantheon and definitely something akin to religious imagery. And Warhammer and Britain caught on to this. And so they created Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k later. Now, Warhammer 40k was a back and forth of the heavy metal magazines, actually, the Metal Hurland. And from there sprang forth a series called 82,000. Things like Judge Dredd, things like Rogue Trooper came from there. And as a response to that one, there were these Warhammer 40k-esque kind of things going on. Now, when I read that first, it wasn't a very satisfying origin story of the Warhammer 40k setting, to be honest. I thought it was just like someone studied the Bible and then decided to go off. No, it's nothing like that. But a lot of things became clearer to me when I realized that this was not a battle of authors. This was not a battle of game designers. This was a battle of dungeon masters. It's not necessarily a battle. It was an exploration, right? And in many ways, you can say that Chris Metzen, in a sense, is just a digital game master. And I've chosen to see more game developers in that light. So look at this, by the way. So this is what he came up with for StarCraft. Now, what's interesting about this picture is that you see a lot of reminiscence towards early Rogue Trader Warhammer 40k because they had this punky style. But what was really cool is that there was also an urge to make the 40k a little bit more Americana. And so I'm not sure where in this picture you can see that, but you can definitely see the intermarriage between the two franchises, right? They looked at each other. They held a mirror in front of each other. And yeah, some people argue that StarCraft and Warhammer 40k are the same thing, and that maybe StarCraft looked a bit too much at Warhammer 40k. I'm not sure about that. It has definitely become its own thing, specifically with the Protoss. But yeah. So this is Rick Priestley. He's the guy that actually came up with Warhammer 40k. He's the Warhammer Rogue Trader guy. And I actually forget why I put him here, but what you can definitely see is that with him, if you look at some of the interviews that he's done, there's he definitely oozes out that whimsicality. I think he is the Terry Pratchett of Games Workshop. I would love to give him that title. And he actually didn't really like where the whole Warhammer 40k direction was headed when they became this more chivalrous type of creature. He had a more humorous punk attitude towards it, and also the idea was a little bit more fleeting for him. He came up with Rogue Trader and then he went on to another project. And it gives so much confidence for me as a hobbyist, because I'm like, yeah, you can just wing it, really. Of course, I'm not mentioning Brian Ansell, by the way, not because I disrespect him or anything, but because I know too little about him to do him justice. I know that he is the beating heart and soul of the whole group, and he's a little bit like the original jock geek, I suppose. But it would be wrong not to cite Rick Priestley as a main factor for this game developer kind of thing. Now, the thing about Brian Ansell that I will say is that Brian Ansell was of huge influence to Rick Priestley, and it was he that sort of wanted to create this idea of agency to the player. This is something that we forget when we talk about D&D, Warhammer 40k, and maybe even Pathfinder. The agency of the player and the DM is what makes it. There was way more of a agreement on open licensing and the SFRD documents in the CRBs were holy, and the game developers expected players to come up with their own shit. So I thought there was a 40k MMO, but apparently there wasn't, and I got really bummed when I saw that. So this picture is actually something of a end destination. Maybe we should just create a different franchise that celebrates this idea of a new MMO with regards to grimdark, heavy metal, and sort of the whimsical side of it all. I can't believe there's not a StarCraft MMO or a Warhammer 40k MMO, and to be frank, maybe it's a little too late for that. But I would definitely be willing to create a world or a universe where we can explore those things together, and where there's also room for players to create their own modded ideas. Further on in these videos, when I publish them, I will tell you about my ideas, and maybe we can sit together and talk shop. Now, this is Berserk. And Berserk was also a major influence of mine during the early 2000s. And it feels to me like Kentaro Miura was on the side of chaos when he wrote Berserk. But he had this gift of creating emotional support for the reader, and also he created these bouts of empathy for the main characters that you were kind of afraid to turn the page because you didn't know what horrors awaited them. I think that type of storytelling is unique to him. But I can definitely see how he too must have been inspired by the things that Brian Ansell was inspired by the things Chris Metzen was inspired by the things Rick Priestley was inspired by. It's not only Lord of the Rings and I don't know, Star Wars and stuff like that. It must have also been like maybe Event Horizon, Alien, H.P. Lovecraft, perhaps. Like all the pop culture things that we cite today that we sort of think might have influenced Grimdark is probably true, and with the internet at the state that it's in right now, it's kind of easy to see those connections. But back then, we're talking 80s, 90s, they didn't know this from each other. It just sort of happened at the same time as these media outlets got released, right? And I think it's important not to forget the Japanese influence on this. Now, here's a picture of Hidetaka Miyazaki-san, who created From Software games and was the beating heart behind that. But what a lot of people don't know is that when he was a kid, his parents forbade him from playing video games, but he got to read the books written by Steve Jackson, the adventure books. Now, it's interesting to listen to those stories because Steve Jackson was of a major influence of Games Workshop. I mean, he was a competitor, don't get me wrong, but also a force of discovering what is possible. These are all guys that figured out ways to explore emergent storytelling. And I think we should never let go of that art form. But you have to understand, right? It's a punk art form. It's the art form of the underdog. It's the art form of those that hide and come out in the shadows and strike. It's not something that you necessarily write down, something that comes from the heart, something that you have to improvise, something that you feel intuitively, I guess. Um, yeah. Now, another Japanese game director that definitely poses as I suppose, a game master, and a grim dark one at that, is Hideo Kojima. He, especially with Death Stranding, shows signs of modern grimdark aesthetic in a Japanese fashion, and it works. I'm playing Death Stranding 2 right now, very casually. I'm a slow gamer. I take my time. And what I love about Death Stranding 2 is that there is room for that. And what's really interesting about Kojima's-san is that Hideo-san, excuse me, he he manages to combine the whimsical with the cute and the horror. He has a very keen eye for balance, believe it or not. And this is particularly shown in Death Stranding, because in Death Stranding, essentially, it's like, Hideo, do whatever the hell you want. And even though he has whales and things are all over the place, he finds the harmony. And I think that shows a sign of a great storyteller. Um, I mean, I know he wants to be a movie director, but I think it's a good thing that he went for game direction, because to me, games and film are linked, but they have a different language, and there's probably more emotional range with film, but there are way more things possible with a game. Like, a game doesn't necessarily seek sympathy from the audience. And so in there, it can really get creative and create these moments that tell the story, right? There's more of an imminence, I suppose. Um, Now, this game, Hellgate London, I think it's the closest thing we had to a sort of grimdark MMO. It failed, unfortunately. It didn't last. Um, Actually had some ex-World of Warcraft workers on it. Um, I mean, it's still available, but it's owned by, I think it's Tencent, and I don't know. The game is dead, unfortunately. You can still play, but it's single player. I want online play. I'm sorry. So anyway, enough about video game design. Let's actually get into a little bit of homebrew D&D, because I think it's time I tell you something about my setting, the world that I made. Um, Bear in mind that this world is a revamped world from my previous D&D campaign that you can find on my channel. But without further ado, let's get into the world that I made. So I will need this one. So here we go. Let me just make it a little bit easier to see. How's that? I think I'm gonna take the left of this video. Alright, so between the two death sectors of Acrist and Ferothia lies the Vale, which is this vast expanse of smaller subsectors. And within these sectors, inhabitants are completely secluded from the rest of the known sectors such as Bith and Yorfith. The edges of this Vale subsectors are controlled by the Olden Ones, a mysterious cosmic race that in effect imprisons the Vale next to the natural occurrences of the death sectors. Now within this Vale lies the Outpath, or perhaps the Plague Gate, as some people call it. The Outpath is a rift into a different dimension, which upon opening has severed the Vale into various boundaries as the weird webs of the Outpath sprawled through this Vale. Demon spawn and hypermite horrors emerged from these cosmic tendrils, as well as Elysian entities and vistas of heavenly ecstasy. The peak of the economy lies within the colonization of these higher dimensions of the Outpath, which has been largely achieved by the dwarven kingdom of Diofra. The Outpath appears to be an infant plane of existence where both heaven, hell, and more go through the machinations of mortality for whatever reasons. From there, ancient vessels were created to ensure the infrastructure between the planes of existence. Commanding such vessels is akin to be a ruler of a planet in terms of military might. Yet, with the second hypermite invasion coming from these cosmic tendrils, all contact with Diofra had been lost, and so have the secrets of the old vessels. While the Dwarven Kingdom is renowned in a strong economic backbone, little is now known of the place, save for some of the lost kings of Gundaren and Old Meriabok, who have always safeguarded their relationship with the dwarves, going back to the tales of the legendary King Marcus Knot and Hailmeister Drell of the Forge. So, in summary, we have essentially space, right? The Milky Way, if you will. And between these two galaxies, or like next, this galaxy is between two death sectors. So essentially two Milky Ways that not only are lifeless, but are actually hazardous for life. They try to, I don't know, they have something of an acidity to them. Like everything that comes within their expanses withers away. You know, one could ask, if you go outside the solar system and you travel our Milky Way, like what if the Andromeda system didn't look so motionful, but instead appeared dormant, dark, and death? Now, I suppose it's interesting to tell you about some of the recent events that occurred within this Vale. Now, the Vale is one of Bith's many secrets, as it captures and bends light during one of the rare arcane instants of time, called the Twilight Equinox. This light interval, which combines the primal pulsar light with one of Bith's anomalous emissions, shimmers through the vast of expanse of planets and moons within the Vale. Light, absorbing fossils and crystals, capture the mutated light of the pulsar and its otherworldly eldritch power, which can be harnessed when extracted properly. These pristine powers have conceived a strong belief in different divine dimensions, planes, gods, and entities. All the while, the rest of known space and the mechanics of the universe remain largely oblivious to the population of the Vale. So, imagine that the sun shines to a shimmering nebula, and as the sunlight shines through that nebula, whatever properties said nebula has, the bendant light gets caught in crystals harboring some ancient, strange, kaleidoscopic power. Now, I've never heard of crystals being able to hold light, but it's something that I came up with, and I'm sure I got it from something. But it's something I do believe in. I think crystals can definitely capture light. I'm not sure if they can capture properties, but well, I don't know. It's what I believe. Sue me. Now, the Vale is inhabited by all sorts of sentient life forms. The edges of these Vale subsectors are controlled by the Olden Ones, the mysterious cosmic race that in effect imprisons the Vale next to all the natural occurrences of the Death Sector. Most humanoids arrived in the Vale through the Second Exodus, which was a large multiracial expedition through the universe with an unknown cause. However, according to records and oral traditions, dwarves, halflings, elves, humans, orcs, guided by the Lashun Thau, came into the valley, pursued by the reptilian Iskarium Saur Armada. However, this enterprise was quickly destroyed by the Olden Ones, who had little interest in passerby fleets. The fleet and the Armada were destroyed, and the Olden Ones went through this cryptic technological length to strip the visitors off of religion and technology. The first few generations were marked with slavery, and the technological reset known as the Maad Boris was upon the inhabitants. Clerics and paladins call this early period the Noble Void, as all the races slowly realized that this was perhaps their accursed or benevolent fate. Slowly, but steadily, the Olden Ones created a humanoid policing life form called the Conflux, and they started to lift certain restrictions, and people started to earn several rights and freedoms. The Conflux left the Vale and started to patrol more of the outer rim of the Vale, letting the inhabitants incrementally flourish their civilizations. Little did the inhabitants know that the Conflux was preparing them for the coming of the Twilight Equinox, for this civilization was ripe to be used for the harvest. Yet a rebellion rose, led by Corin the Mad. For he had saturated the properties of the minerals, allowing him to create and enter the portal of the Outpath with the help of Brother Rogar, where demons reside and gods pulse their infancy. While this was always the goal of the Conflux, it was never meant to be done with ECA number 3, which is the highest level of civilization, allowing for skepticism on the interpretation. Upon Corin's return, war broke out between him and Brother Rogar, which resulted in complete abandonment of the Embryonic Civilization Act, allowing civilizations to thrive, create, regress, and destroy. Several attempts had been made by Corin to balance technology with the interpretation. For one, he had exiled prominent demons to the pocket dimensions of Kronax, which in turn prohibited the Vale from star travel. Some sectors had devolved in that technology, others flourished. The Kronax kings of Gunderhan set out to teach the ways of the past, present, and future. Corin also inverted the pocket dimensions of Meriabok, which had stagnated the entire Vale due to their archaic ways. Through Kronax and the Academy of Meriabok, the Kingdom of Gundar was created, and an alliance between the Sagestone Circles, Gunderhan, and the dwarves from the Banded Rings of Quandam was formed. However, madness started to rule Corin's mind. Much like his predecessor, Harges, a same fate had befallen to him. Solipsic secrets were revealed to Corin, and his interchanging with the Outpath had left him leaving in a crisis only oblivion could solve. From the remnants of the destroyed Cerebroanic system, he had built the Asylum of Statues, where he tried to find spores of Sherbon, infusing him with amnesia and strength. Him and his followers Suljin, Uthilgard, Alcide Bassifer, Jade Trinsdale, Lilith, and several others had to cope with their divine madness, granted by whatever mysteries light within the Outpath. It was Brother Rogar, the mercenary king, who divided the rest of the Vale. Rogar aided with the diplomacy of the Sabjillian Dragonmasters and Gundar Miofra. The mercenary king, however, recruited many independent factions into his personal fleet, and he founded the mercenary kingdoms. Smaller kingdoms who fought on either the side of the Leventrance Empire or the Gundurhan Miofra kingdom. It was at this time that the first Hypermite invasion began. From the outpath, warp-like tendrils seeped through the fabric of space, which organically partitioned much of the Vale for millennia. Space travel was ensured through the means of Sabjellion, a long-forgotten mineral which replaced Kronax, given that Kronax opened the drift of the Nameless and thus became forbidden. Now, we have some minerals. So like I said, there is this light that shines through the veil, and its light is bent by the outer nebulas from the death sectors, and the light gets bent and caught by several minerals within the veil sector. And we're going to talk about these minerals. So the first one is Ibishmore. So the mutated bent pulsar of Bith and the outpath as well still shines through the valley, and the minerals of the many subsectors begin harboring stranger and stranger magic. The economy of the Vale thrived on mineral expeditions to extract the properties and traverse the warp in an attempt to colonize the outpath. So imagine, right, that a rift opens somewhere in our universe, and we actually have data that, it's an entry to heaven, but it's a proto-heaven. It's a heaven that's still in the womb of whatever cosmic law there is. And now humans want to colonize that idea. So the 8 known minerals became Ibishmore, Apthorax, Fahrenite, Presh, Sherbon, Kronax, Sabjellion, and Miasma. Now, if you're not following this, please don't care, because if you're vibing, that's enough, right? But suffice to say that Ibishmore is a mineral that is mostly wielded by the sigillists of He Who Ghosts, which is an entity, and it is known as having social magic. The wielder uses it for diplomatic endeavors, bluffs, performances, bartering, sensing one's motives, and it's found on the triumphant plains of Brother Farah. Its store value is rather high. The planet Moon is inhabited by mainly the Erlen, a fauna-like entity who refuse to be linked to the minerals, although it seems to be linked somewhat, alongside the Sour, Lynx, humans, and once the Elves. During the Noble Void, the Sour and the Erlen decided to make peace with the other races and provided underground shelter for the other races, and took care of them. Many religions within the Vale therefore depict the reptilian Sour as holy warriors. Ibishmore is a mineral that you can use in order to barter more efficiently, to convince. And right here we see a trader talking with a lady, probably a lady of the Prism Dukes, and he's sort of convincing them of something, right? Now here we have Fahrenite. Fahrenite is it's an interesting one. it harbors elemental and hurtful magic that blasts fire, ice, earth, air to its target, essentially the elements of Avatar. And these Fahrenheit crystals are mainly found in the four corners of the veil. The wielder can produce a fireball, magic missiles, other strange arcane offensive spells through a gauntlet. It's largely forbidden to use within the system. Fahrenheit is found within the spire corner of the veil. Ice Fahrenheit can be found within the loop, and it's mainly used by Presh harvesters and smugglers to cool down their AI societies and devices. Earth and Farron can be found on the six guardian satellites of a Christ, and is also by and large harvested and smuggled by Presh harvesters with the religious mission to build an asteroid named Karak. Air Farron can be found within the glass mazes of Murfag. This is by far the most typical magical mineral there is. Oh, I love this one. This is Presh. So, Presh is a substance that can be used for artifacts and other creations. It's commonly found within the veil, and is used for traps, vehicles, devices, and other metallic companions. In several locations, Presh has its component create themselves, arising small factions like the Conwood Grove and the Oros Midden. When the elves were almost extinct after the Exo collapsed, they sided with the small factions, and the rare elves that now exist master automaton entities known as Key Elders. Presh is kind of valuable, has a store value of 6. And here you see these elves of the Blue Phage siding with the Oros Midden Presh factions. All right. So I already talked about Sharebutton, or the Sherboanic system, rather. So, um, Sharebutton is used as protection for magic, which has been largely harbored by the richer houses within the system. So it's a protective magic, right? Like a shield kind of magic. It was mainly found within the Lunar Ashes Empire before the destruction of the Sherboanic sectors. Its user becomes more agile, stronger, faster, and it is known for having healing properties. Additionally, abjurators of the Onyx Highlands discover that Sherban casts a magical layer which briefly wipes the memory of its user but grants protection for all the other known minerals. Whether the memory wipe has influenced Bith technology or vice versa echoes as a matter of academic debate. Nevertheless, the abjurators believe that the minerals echo and influence one another. From the remnants of the Sherboanic civilization, Corin the Mad had created the Asylum of Statues to aid him into his oblivion. So, this mineral now has been harvested by Corin the Mad, which is essentially this mad robotic wizard that now resides within the Veil, and he has created this giant network chained asteroids and statues that harbor Sherban to make him forget whatever he saw within the outpath. This strange amalgam of heaven, hell, and Elysium? We don't know. So this is Chronax. Chronax is a substance akin to sulfur, which is extracted to influence time. The Conflux, which was sort of the humanoid version of the olden ones, had the most interest in this mineral, for it helped them to build an engine made ripe for interstellar travel. The wielder could go back and forth in time for brief moments. However, users mention that they build up a phenomenon commonly known as time depth. Records state that its usage advances a strange war within the ephemeral location called the Sanctum Betwixt. The substance is commonly found on largely medieval Viking realms of Gondoran. After the interpretation, Corin the Mad had restricted its usage due to the demon presence within several pocket dimensions. So, a pocket dimension, we have like heaven, then we have the veil, and then we have several pocket dimensions. People and wizards were able to create these secret dimensions within the veil where they could sort of hide, maybe. But also, like, they have these pocket dimensions use used for essentially what do you call them? State obligations, like debt that you pay, but you paid in time. So there are these pocket dimensions where time moves differently so that they can sort of balance out what they've abused in the veil. So the veil is like real space, the heaven, hell, Elysium outpath, that's sort of the warp. And then we have these pocket dimensions that had various functions, but now they are forbidden because demons started to invest them. Now, last but not least, we have miasma. Now, miasma is this alabaster substance, and it has a bitter gentian taste, and it's not only rare, but it's also kind of difficult to extract this one. Conjurers schools of the exocollapse have tried to harbor its power, but every time such an attempt was made, the wielder became addicted to the substance and wished to protect it in kind of delirious fashion. Therefore, little is known about miasma objectively, other than that large arcology cities are built around this substance, indicating that a previous civilization before the Mad had also attempted its extraction but failed. Nevertheless, some records have been made on the substance and the properties appear most significant. First, it had been said to grant wishes and put the wielder into a desired position. Also, the wielder witnesses lucid visions when it's consumed, causing severe dependency, psychological dependency, on the substance, but also physical ones, by the way. Now, another strange benefit is that it attracts demonic and necrotic subtypes creatures for no apparent reason. So when you take it, all the undead within the veil, they come towards you. It's like a magnet. Therefore, the miasma metropoles within the veil are often the target of undead armies, primarily the Cyphernauticum of the Conartir. And there are other demon entities which have ensured a relative peace within the system, given that the miasmic arc metropolises, known as MAM, are protected by a vaporous shroud that lifts every once in a while. So people mine miasma, and all the undead sort of migrate towards it, but they are shielded. So by and large, the undead problem within the Veil has been catered for a while because they seem to be kind of predictable in their movements, save for this campaign. People are allowed to go to miasmic cities when the Shroud of Arcane Delights lifts. However, everyone that goes to these miasmic cities never return. Never. Now, miasma and the other minerals are extracted by the inhabitants of the Vale and are traded with the Conflux Veritas. Conflux Veritas polices the outer rim of the Vale using various biotech satellites and vessels. Additionally, they keep to a cryptic cycle known as the Mad Aboris that resets technology of the inhabitants to prevent an uprising or an exodus. During Corin's breach, that cycle was almost completed and the technological level was between steam and steel engine vehicles together with a minor fraction of high-tech weaponry and gear. Within the valley, a fleet called the Seraph Division is planning an exodus to escape the Conflux Veritas and look for what is beyond the valley. Also, the miasmic shroud on one of the miasmic arc metropoles had lifted near the Banned Rings of Quandam. The last time the shroud was lifted from this particular city, the Seraph Division sent a dispatch of archmages and scholars to see if they could somehow influence its followers. The most prominent of those scientists was Mornath, the Drifter. It was known that he had somehow seized power over Miasma, and had created a cult-like society over the years. With the recent lifting of the shroud, Seraph the Vision sent a group of infiltrants to see if they could investigate what happened to Mornath, and perhaps harbor the power of the substance, for such a power would be most beneficial in the planning of this exodus. However, Mornath had quite different plans. As the Complex Verdus had attempted to prevent Fahrenheim, the city, the cult city, to ever flourish in their miasmic economy, Corin the Mad, the Calf leader and the mercenary king, had helped Mornath to complete the construction of the Mind Forge, a cannon atop the Lodestar, his interdimensional fortress. It was Corin the Mad who had shot the cannon and destroyed the Sherboanic sectors. The cannon wielding miasmic properties had opened the Holy Rift, now known as the Outpath. The Lodestar had set off for the Outpath, but it was at this moment that Mornath started to become more frantic and erratic towards his companions. Corin and the mercenary king found within the depths of the Lodestar a captive. This was none other than Brother Rogar. Unaware of his powers, Rogar joined Corin the Mad before they went to war with one another. So this is Corin and Rogar going to war. Now, I think it's time to move over to some of the interesting NPCs that feature in this campaign. So the first one is Epigundar och Alamajan. He is the Bannerlord of Gundaran. And he, in many ways, was the mightiest leader ever known to man. His only caveat was that he knew how to take kingdoms, but never got the hang of ruling them. Aware of his weakness, Epigundar sought ways to provide other kings, queens, and warriors and mages to flourish. Corin and Rogar helped him destroy the albino dragon from the many pocket dimensions within the Veil. And within the deportation of the eagle within the drift, he, Corin, and Rogar managed to close off the demon invasion, which saved the Veil from an invasion, but also prevented space travel for many centuries. Later, together with the Archlord Bolton, he liberated Gundar and Miofra from the Olden Ones. Excuse me, that's not Gundar and Miofra, that's Gundaran. After the war between Rogar and Corin, Epigundar sought out ways to unify the Veil from the first Hypermight invasion. Not long after, King Boros Braknu invited him to his halls in Diofra, from the Proto-Heavens to fight a war against the 10th Fleet of Destry. From there, a long friendship endured, and Epigundar remained within Yaltskir. Not long after the destruction of Destry's fleet, he realized that his days as a conqueror, liberator, and rebel were over. Additionally, so were his ways with kings and courtship, as instead he wandered the plains as a helper of many. Fighting off the demons from the tendrils, he perished at the hands of the Hypermight Lord of Doldoroth. Upon his death, he ensured that his friends will be appointed seneschal in an attempt to transfer his body towards the halls of surfing underneath Diofra. The ancient vessel Fellerhold serves as a united banner of the Veil towards the demons who now rule Diofra. A last fight that would last for an eternity. So this is the king of the deep, Boros Braknu. He's the dwarven king who is regarded as the best friend of Epigundar och Almajan. Through the Stone Rage, Boros entered the Outpath, independent of Corin and Rogar, and he saw the interpretation. Unlike Seljan, Elside, and Jade, he had endured the interpretation of the merging, opting for permanent colonization of the Outpath and starting his settlement on the Opera. He manages to maintain his vision through the Veil and the Outpath. Upon the second Hypermind invasion, contact has been lost with the King of the Deep, but many dwarves believe that the Boros speaks to those close to Upagandar that endure the Stone Rage. So this is Seljan Uthelgard. He was an augury instructor on Freedom for a while and had been a student of Mornath the Drifter. He studied at the Academy of Mariabok together with Alex Grace. Seljan Uthelgard was the leader of the League of Assassin Mages. He was one of the interpreters brought forth by Corrin. He, Alcide Bassifer, and Jade Trinsdale had their fates merged from beyond the infant heavens of the Outpath, which led to an archaic dispute between the three, not fully understood. Ever since, Seljan sought out adventure, searching for artifacts and other remnants from the Outpath and its demonic tendrils. After an assault by the Saphagons on a colonial planet in the Pass system, he decided to become a wanderer after his wife abandoned him. He slowly learned that his ambitions lay within space travels and beings from the Outpath, with arcane wealth as the ultimate goal. From then on, he became the leader of the League of Blades, a consortium of assassin mages. Much of this faction consists of lost civilizations with a keen relationship to magic. One of the most notable things that Seljan has achieved is the liberation of the blue phage elves in the Oros Midden and Conduit Grove systems. So this here is Alex Grace. She's a scientist for the League of Blades, functioning as a field investigator of anomalies. She has a specific relationship to Seljan that seems to be beyond love and friendship. She keenly believes what he does is right, but seems otherwise shy and maybe a little bit aloof. She has a particular interest in the Utherlan and the Saphagund aliens. So Antrelus Whitman is the employer of Alex Grace and guides most of the goals of the League of Blades. He worked closely together with Mornath the Drifter and has even befriended him eons ago. Antrelus Whitman discovered the black fruits of the adulating gardens within the Outpath, granting him, Seljan, and Alex with long life, as long as they pursue the ways of augury. So, Mercenary Commander Neelith Line is one of the most influential independent rulers within the Mercenary Kingdoms, and he tries to influence the Kingdom of Gundar and Miofra from the proxy seat of the Sagedom Circles. At the moment, he has an allegiance toward the League of Blades, finding much common ground with Seljan. Mornath 7 is an augmented clone of Mornath the Drifter. Seljan had rediscovered his hexacore and, knowing his own master quite well, had gone through arduous lengths to restore and teach Mornath 7 the ways of magic and wisdom, in an attempt to recreate his master before he went mad and enslaved the band of Rings of Quantum and opened the Open. This restoration enraged Rogar Destry and Corrin, leaving Seljan in complete abandonment and even attempts at exile. Mornath 7 now serves as a well-functioning protector within the Mercenary Kingdoms and the League of Blades. Yes. Archlord Bolton the Brave. He has been one of the main forces within the Gundar and Miofra Kingdom, and he has ensured the destruction of the barbarian lords within Gundaren. Moreover, he was the sole reason for the destruction of the Olden Ones on Gundaren. He has sealed much of the Forbidden Time portals and had exiled Duria, the daughter of Mornath. Upon the king's death, much debate has been going on about the bloodlines of Bolton, indicating that he's an indirect heir to the empty throne of Mariabok. Once crowned king, he would be able to master all forms of magic and infuse the kingdom through his own bloodline. So this is Lord General Rofield Fitter. He serves the Gunnar and Miofra kingdom, served it for many years, and the admiral has fought the Leventrans Empire and the Saphagons during the formation of Gunnar and Miofra. He also played a major role in the non-aggression pacts between the kingdom and Destry's mercenary kingdoms. This is Captain Kalinova. She serves under the Lord General, and despite her position, she is very blithe, optimistic, and sometimes even impulsive. Much of her actions in the past have been a matter of military debate, considering the fact that she has a way of privatizing armies, a phenomenon strictly forbidden within the kingdom of Gunnar Miofra, but not unheard of within the mercenary kingdoms. Lord General Rofield Fitter often employs her when his sons are unable to reach results through conventional means. So, Lord Commander Dysel Fitter, he's the son of the Lord General Rofield Fitter. He's a virulent, steadfast leader, and in many ways seen as the ultimate candidate for the unification of the Vale and destroyer of the demonic forces that enrapture the Void. Much to the dismay of his father, Dysel only deals with technological improvements, omniscience, and intellectual applications, next to his love for strategy, having no room for any form of marriage in his personal life. He's known to only value brotherhood, discipline, tactic. Arch-Chaplain Jeff Fitter is the younger brother of Dysel Fitter. Him and his brother are quite different in that Jeff has always shown more ambition and cunning, but utter failure in most of his attempts, leading him to have a questionable lifestyle. Accusations of debt, corruption, and outright betrayal have often been associated with his name. Yet his father refuses to believe that his son would go through such lengths with no clear cause. After his mom passed away, Jeff asked his father to become an arch-chaplain in an attempt to unify the Gunnar and Miofra kingdom under a form of religion that combines the mortality of Brother Rogar Bith and the infancy of heaven within the outpath. Lord Eidolon Baronixus. He is an offspring creation from the Asylum of Statues. Corin, in his last moments of considerable sanity, taught the art of kingship to many of these statue-like automatons. If the bloodlines through the forming kingdoms would lead to divine madness, a Lord Eidolon would be functioning as a Lord Protector. With the rumored illness of mind with King Triadus, Baronix's neutral reign is in full effect with the guidance of Archlord Bolton the Brave. So this is Jade Trinsill. She was the third wife of Mornath, who injected permanent miasma into her, making her the first withered addict. She's also one of the interpreters, alongside Selgin and Alcide, whom she entered the merging. The Pirates of Freedom found her and helped her in her recovery and taught her the art of crime. She has killed various persons, traversed the universe, and became a well-known criminal throughout the story. Later, she became reacquainted with Alcide Bassifer, with whom she has a loving relationship. Jade Trinsill is also one of the last elves from the Blue Phage. Lilith Anju of Barath and the Houses is an influential heir to the throne within the kingdom of Gunnar and Miofra. However, being raised and picked up by Corin at a young age, she was trained to traverse the outpath with him and establish the route to the roped tendrils. Together with the Gunnaran lords such as Upper Gandalf, she has established many connections with places from the outpath towards the Vale. She's one of the interpreters who had foregone the merging and instead guided Corin to the answers he so desperately sought out. Upon her return, she sided with Rogar in an attempt to stop Corin's endeavors to recreate the Maat in his ways. After the war, she and Rogar went through many trials and tribulations in an attempt to unify the Vale. Rogar taught her the ways of the Egg, from which she conceived a fleet that guided the first humans, dwarves, and elves towards Diofra. There, they discovered the halls of serving, from which the warriors of the Sanctum Betwixt could serve the mortal realms from the reaches of the Proto-Heaven. Moreover, from above Diofra she also created Hjalskir, a beacon serving as a resting place for the Valkyries who are trained to guide the warriors of Gundren towards Hjalskir. Lilith, Anju of Berith, transforms in appearance whenever she uses portals and sometimes has to switch with her human alter ego to regain much of her ability. Emperor Glovis Leventransk III is the most influential faction leader within the Mervachian systems, the Ring systems, and the Tolkerud Rim. His faction is the Leventransk Empire. Despite being considered a dictator, Leventransk has also provided protection against many demonic forces, as he employed the robot army of Mornath to do his bidding. Word has it he also controls the Gen Shada spy masters. The Leventransk Empire was founded out of a confederacy with a much feared faction unknown to most inhabitants of the Vale. Upon discovering the artifacts from the Outpath, he had declared independence from the confederacy and funded much of Corin's expeditions, much to the dismay of Rogar. Shortly thereafter, Leventransk became a main threat for the Gundren and Miofra alliance through the use of the mercenary kingdoms. Archking Triadus Infoldus of Mariabok is the king of the Gundren Miofra kingdom. Recently he has been aided by none other than Emperor Leventransk in an attempt to overthrow the Field's commander units. Much of the inhabitants within the kingdom refuse to listen to this king and instead regard Baron Ixis, the Lord Eidolon, to be the de facto ruler, being infused with the wisdoms of the Academy of Mariabok and beyond. Sapphicant aberrations appear an only male species within the Vale. They hunt for biological species to experiment on in an attempt to reproduce. The aliens were once with many but died out. They did know that they had feeble members, but somehow they lost contact. They create clone-like creatures out of humans in order to experiment. Their origins can be traced back from the interpretation and the merging. Alcide Bassifer is an old friend of Seljan, Uthilgard, Corin, Destri, and Rogar, having even granted them his dog as a token of gratitude. Corin appointed him towards the interpretation within the Outpath, reaching Los Pocahobos. Him, Seljan, and Jade Transdil entered the merging, leading to a strange falling out between the three, which in turn led to a small civil war, mainly led by Alcide. Together with Jade Transdil, Alcide rules freedom, and it's a main pawn within the mercenary kingdoms. In the end, he drove off Destri and the remainder of his fleet. Sabugol Odaga is the leader of the Summer Enclave. He's one of the holders of Sabjellian magic, and his forefathers have fought with Mornath the Drifter in their ongoing battle, resulting in the creation of Koronak, Sabjellian, and the many pocket universes within the Vale. That war, known as the Exo-Collapse, reawakens from time to time, for the war was meant to be eternal and has evolved into a reappearing disease. Sabugol Odaga has taken over one of the first planets from within the Prism Duke sectors, being chosen by his father to succeed him. In doing so, Sabugol has killed his own brother and wife, out of rightful paranoia and intrigue. Now he uses Lakinia as a decoy for his true plans. Right. Lakinia Constantine VI is a ceremonial leader of the second strongest faction, the Summer Enclave. During the Civil War, out of the interpretation, her house was raided and her royal bloodline was auctioned off by a strange agent within the mercenary kingdoms. Her entire family was either murdered, auctioned, enslaved, or experimented on. Lakinia Constantine VI has a special bloodline, having Subgelian and Chronex flow through her. At the notion of the properties of her bloodline, the Prism Mogul from Pharos ensured to buy Lakinia and provide her with a small kingdom, in an attempt to broaden his empire through the intermarriage of Lakinia and his heir. Not being able to conceive a son, the Prism Mogul raised Lakinia like a daughter, fit to rule the Vale. Nisha is one of the last of Mornath's kin. Rumor has it that her family had been hidden away by the Genshida spymaster, given that Mornath's origins had always been within the android reproduction lines. Therefore, little is known of the actual Mornath the Drifter. However, through extensive research within the mercenary kingdoms, his long-lost bloodline had been found showing considerable aptitude in magic, and more importantly, a talent for figuring out the meaning behind the interpretation. For reasons unknown, Corin forbade her from entering the Outpath, and had locked her up within the holy asylum he had built for himself at first. Now, last but not least, we have a magic system within my world, and that works as follows. There are 3 magic systems within the Vale: Lineage, Augury, Herb Augury, and Arcanum. All 3 of them can rule one another out. So we have Lineage Augury, which consists of Illusion Magic, Trash Magic, the School of Conjuration, Subgelian, Chronax, Soul Magic, Hero Magic, Blood Magic, and this one controls Herb Augury. Now, Herb Augury consists of Apthorax, Ibishmore, Fahrenheit, Sherbon, Chronax, which is forbidden, Miasma, the School of Abjuration, School of Divination, School of Enchantment, Transmutation, Statue Imbuement, and this one controls Arcanum. And Arcanum, that deals with the Sequence, Frostfire, Konar, Evocation, the School of Necromancy, Rogar's Dragon Magic, and this one controls Lineage Augury. So that is roughly the setting that I work with. Now, in the next video, I will present a small summary of the player characters that we'll be having for this campaign, and I will start playing the first episodes that we've already done. It's mostly still about character creation and me introducing a lot of the ideas that I have, but I think it will be interesting for you to listen to them. And yeah, that's really what I have for now. I've already prepared much of the sessions in terms of plot and which characters are there. Only thing I've had to read through the CRB one more time. The next thing that I really need to do, that I will also show you in a video, is consider some of the combat cards, the economy, the rewards, and of course the encounter tracking. You know, show off some enemies that they will encounter, and show off some homebrew considerations that I've made. So yeah. All right, that's the video, guys. Well, in the next video, I will do as I just said. See ya.